Okay, for this video I'm talking about two-dimensional arrays. I'm not going to be using the computer for this video. I just want to go over the few basic pieces of arrays that are two-dimensional arrays that you kind of have to know and to see visually. So this is how you declare a two-dimensional array. You use the two brackets. Okay, and then here that's the name of the array. So these are of type int, so that anything can go there at all. It can be an object, a double, strings, anything at all. And then we have two numbers over here. So the same basic idea as when doing a one-dimensional array, but we have two little boxes instead. This one is how many rows you want. Let me make that a little thicker. And this one is how many columns. Okay, so it's just like matrix if you've ever done a matrix math before. So this one creates five rows. So that's 5 here, and the indexes are 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's what this number does. So this is a row right here, and you kind of have to visualize it. Sometimes it freaks you out. So this is one row, 2, etc. Then there's 3 columns, so going down, and those indexes are 0, 1, and 2. So that's how a two-dimensional array is created. You know, this particular one would have zeros in all of the entries because I didn't assign it any values. So you can assign values to a two-dimensional array right away, just like you did in a one-dimensional array. So this is a one-dimensional array, if you recall. And for example, this would create an array 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, what you have to think about is these are in between these commas right here. These are your rows. So this is 1 row, this is 2 rows, this is 3 rows, and this is 4 rows. All right, so that would create an effect like this. So it would create this one row right here with the values 1, 2, and 3 in it. It would create a second row here, 6, 5, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 1, 4, 8. So that's how it would create. So each one of these is its own row right here. So this is the 0 row, this is the 1 row, this is the 2, and the 3. And then each one of these pieces, the columns, is 0, 1, and 2. And so doing this, we are able to actually call different pieces of the array. So here we are. Some people like to write it like this. When they assign it, you know, spacing doesn't really matter. So if you actually assign it like this, it makes more sense because this row right here would go here and so on. So if you declare it like this by hitting enter instead of doing it all in one row, some people do that just to make it a little bit more clear. It's up to you. It's completely style. It makes no difference. So what would output if I called more nums 0, 0? So remember, this is your rows and this is your column. So these are the rows and these are the column indexes. So 0, we would start here, and 0 would be there. So what's the element inside? Well, that would output 1. So this next one, 1 is the row, so here's the row, and 2 is the column. So this is 1, and then I'd follow up with the 2 columns. So we would follow this all the way over to 2, so what would output here would be 4. So 3, 2, 3 is the row, we followed it over all the way over to 2, so that would be your 8. Okay, and then if we tried to do 2, 3, so this is 2, tried to get over to 3, oh, there isn't a 3 over here, this would have an error here because it's not that big. Okay, so that's how we declare and we look at values. Now you could also assign values. Say I wanted to change that 8 here. We could assign it more nums 3, 2 equals 15. and this would change this value here to 15. So it's the same idea, you just always have to have your rows and then your columns in order. So because of this, and because of the essence of the rows and the columns, for loops are necessary, but not just for loops, but nested for loops. All right, so when we look at this, I'm going to assume that this array has been initialized, so it's got some values in it. I'll put values in it in a minute, but what if I want to know how long the rows are? So I'm going to have this num rows here. I'm going to include this in my first for loop, my outside for loop here. So how would I figure out how long it is if I don't know what's been initialized? The way that we do this, you definitely remind you of something. We do array.length. This gives us the number of rows. But how do you do not the number of columns? How does that work? Well, what we do is we take one of the rows. So it doesn't matter which one. Generally take the 0 one. So we take, okay, now let's look at that row and find the length of that row. So basically, in essence, this is an array inside of an array, and that's how the computer thinks of it. It doesn't necessarily think of it as a two-dimensional array. It thinks of it as having an array and having arrays inside of them. But that's a little bit too confusing for us to think about as human beings. So what we think about is two-dimensional instead. So I'm going to fill this array. I'm going to create a little fake array over here, and then I'm going to come back and show you what this for loop here does. Alright, so this, I just created a little array right here. It has 3 rows and it has 4 columns. So what we're going to do, what happens is, what we do is we create this outside for loop that goes through this row. So it's going to start at this row at 0. So the row starts at 0 here. And then it's going to go through this for loop, and it's going to go through all the columns. So it's going to go through each one of these one at a time. So it's going to start out and it's going to go to 0, and then it's going to go 1, 2, and 3. So it's going to go 0, 0, then 0, 1, then 0, 2, then 0, 3. So that is how we like to go through for loops, in a very orderly way. We don't just kind of go all over the place. We look at either the rows first, and we keep the 0 constant here for this first for loop. So the first one that I go through, that's 0. And then it goes through each one of these elements, and it's going to print out the 10, and then a space, then the 20, then the 30, then the 40. So once it's then done this whole for loop here, and I don't think I can erase now because the way this stupid program works. No, I can't. So now that I've gone through this for loop, this whole thing, and I've gotten to the end of the columns, I've gotten to the 3, it changed to 4, I'm going to move it to the next line. So this, the output will now move to here. My row is now, I'm going to have to change my color, the row is now going to change to 1. And the columns is still going to go through 0, 1, 2, and 3. So now it's going to go from here, row is going to remain constant because I'm in here. And then it's going to go 6, 7, 8, 9, and it's going to output that. And then it changes, moves this down, this moves it to the next line, this changes then to 2, and I'm going to go through, make this 2, and it's going to go through the 0 spot, the 1 spot, the 2 spot, and the 3 spot. So that's how this guy would output. So in this particular sense, if we put the rows on the outside and we keep that constant, it's going to go through the array this way. So it's going to go through in a linear fashion through the top row, then the second row, then the third, and however many rows it goes through. If we switch it around and we do it this way, so I'm going to put another array here, give me a sec. Okay, so this one I'm going through the columns first. So if the columns remain constant and the rows change, I'm going to go start with the 0 and go 5, 25, 45. So I'm going to go down this way. So this is a way to compute the sum. So I'm going to compute the column sum. So I'm going to figure out how to do this. Now you could have done the same thing up here with the rows, but I chose to do an output at that point. So the column sum, it's going to go through, the column is going to remain constant. So in this case, the column here is 0. It starts out at 0. And this one goes through from 0. Oops, sorry, I messed this one up. This should have been row, and this should have been col. My bad. So it's going to, this column is going to remain 0, and the row is going to go up 1, 0, 1, 2. It's going to add these guys up going down. So depending on how you want to traverse your array, you just switch what comes first, columns or rows. So if you want to go this way horizontally, rows is going to go outside. Let me just, sorry. So rows is just going to go on, you know, at first. So that's the one that stays the same, and then this one repeats until it's done. Then it's going to output the sum. You come back up here, column's going to change to 1, and then it's going to go down and increase the rows 0, 1, and 2. So what should output for this particular one, it's going to say column, sum, and then it's going to say whatever col is. So in this case it's 0 column, so that's here, because 0 is going to remains constant here. And then it's going to go through the 0, 1, and 2, adding them up here. And so in this case 75. And then it's going to do it again, the column sum, and it's going to go through 1, and it's going to go add them up to going down this way. So the 1 remains constant. Sorry, it just doesn't allow me to erase anymore. The 1 remains constant, and the 0, 1, and 2 increases. So that would be 90. And then, you know, and so on. Column sum 2. Yeah, now I have to actually do some math here. So this is 70, 105 maybe. And if I'm wrong, I'm sure you'll tell me tomorrow. And then 120 for column 3. So what remained constant was the columns. Okay, that stayed, and remember it's still the second position. So this is the one that stays there, and the rows, you know, repeated itself and kept going over and over. So this takes a little while to get used to, of course. So hopefully this helps a little.